It was supposed to be a simple afternoon tea. But when the garden door opened on its own, everything changed. A whisper drifted through the jasmine trees, calling Mainie's name. A voice no one had heard in 30 years. What secret did this house hide? And why did the tea party end in silence? Stay till the end, because the mystery only begins when the last cup is poured. That afternoon tea began with the soft glow of the afternoon sun. The fragrance of fine tea leaves floated gently through the air. On the long wooden table in the garden, teacups were neatly arranged like something out of a dream. Manie, the hostess, greeted every guest with graceful poise. Soft laughter mixed with the delicate sound of sipping tea, like a melody. Yet, in Manie's eyes, something was quietly hidden. A breeze passed through, carrying red rose petals that landed upon the table. A drop of tea slowly rolled down the edge of a saucer. She paused to look at it, and an odd uneasiness began to creep into her chest. One guest reached for a cookie. His fingers trembled slightly before placing it back. Every gaze turned toward him, as if drawn by an invisible force. The old clock in the living room began to chime. Once, twice, 3 times. And as the final echo faded, the garden door slowly opened on its own. Manie knew that no one should have been there. Sunlight reflected off the teapot in a strange shimmer. It was as if a shadow, someone's reflection, had appeared in the metal. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat, and the faint sound of rustling leaves seemed to grow louder in her ears. The guests exchanged puzzled glances, unsure whether to laugh or remain silent. Only the wind spoke, brushing past their faces like an unseen hand. Manie turned her head slowly toward the garden door. The hinges creaked faintly, swaying just enough to let a sliver of sunlight through. Beyond that door lay a narrow path lined with old jasmine trees her grandmother had planted decades ago. She had always loved their scent, but now, it smelled different, richer, heavier, almost metallic. Her heart began to beat faster. She wanted to speak, to ask if anyone had seen it too, but the words never left her lips. The air felt thick, and every sound, the ticking clock, the birds, even the soft clinking of porcelain, seemed to melt into a strange, haunting silence. Did someone just go outside? One of the guests finally asked. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a polite smile. No one answered. Then came the whisper. It was faint at first, like the sigh of wind through reeds. But soon, it took shape, a low murmur that seemed to circle the table, brushing past each ear. No one could make out the words, yet everyone heard it. A breath, a voice, something alive, but unseen. Manie's fingers tightened around her teacup. Her knuckles turned pale. The porcelain was warm, but her hands were ice cold. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a reflection in her tea. A face that was not her own. She blinked. The image vanished. The guests were watching her now, their smiles gone. The air around the table felt charged, as though electricity ran through the soil beneath them. I think it must be the wind, she said softly, trying to steady her voice. But even she did not believe her words. The garden was completely still. Not a single branch moved. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic dripping of tea onto the tablecloth. And then, footsteps, slow, measured, coming from the path beyond the open door. The sound of gravel crunching beneath shoes. One step, another, closer. Every guest turned toward the doorway. A shadow appeared, long, thin, wavering. It stopped just beyond the threshold. Who was there? Manie called out. Her voice cracked, slightly. No one replied. The shadow shifted, and before anyone could react, a gust of wind swept through the garden, toppling one of the teacups. The porcelain shattered, echoing like a scream in the silence. A few guests gasped. One even stood up, ready to run. But Manie didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on something near the door. Something glimmering faintly on the ground. It was a small silver pendant. Round, with a faint engraving of a lotus flower. She knew that pendant. It had belonged to her grandmother, buried with her 30 years ago. Her mind began to spin. No one could have taken it. No one even knew where her grandmother's grave was, except her. Her heart pounded in her ears. The guests whispered among themselves, wondering if it was part of a game, or some strange performance. But when Manie picked up the pendant, they saw her face. And they knew it was not. Her eyes filled with something close to terror, but deeper, like recognition. She looked at the pendant closely, and saw the faint outline of a fingerprint burned into the metal. Still warm. A cold gust swept across the garden again, and this time, the jasmine trees began to move, not with the wind, but as if something invisible brushed against them. Petals fell like snow. And in the air, that voice returned. It was clearer now, feminine, soft, Mamie. The name floated through the air, almost lovingly. Mamie staggered back, the pendant slipping from her fingers. It hit the ground with a dull thud. Mamie. The voice again, closer this time, and unmistakably real. Her breath came out in short gasps. Her vision blurred, not from fear, but from memory. The tea set, the roses, the path. Everything around her suddenly felt familiar in a way it should not have. She remembered being a little girl, sitting under those same jasmine trees. Her grandmother's hand resting gently on her shoulder. Her voice saying, "One day, this house will keep its secrets safe. But never open the garden door when the sun begins to set." Mamie looked up. The sunlight was fading fast, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. The shadows grew longer, reaching toward her like fingers. The guests began to panic quietly. One of them said they should leave. Another tried to close the door, but it refused to budge. It was as though something was holding it open from the other side. And then, they saw it. For just a moment, a figure standing in the doorway. It was not solid, not exactly human, just the outline of a woman, her dress flowing like mist, her hair long and silver, her eyes empty and knowing. She stepped forward once. The air grew icy cold. Every candle flickered out, plunging the garden into half-darkness. Someone screamed. Someone else fainted. But Mamie did not move. Her lips parted, trembling as if she wanted to speak. The figure tilted her head slightly, almost in affection. Then she smiled. It was a smile Mamie remembered. The same gentle curve, the same warmth her grandmother had when she poured her first cup of tea as a child. But behind that smile now was something, broken. Something that should not have crossed from one world to another. The pendant on the ground began to tremble. A faint humming sound rose from it, like the echo of a lullaby. The same lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Mamie's knees weakened. She fell to the ground, clutching her chest. The voice whispered one last time, softer than breath. "You opened the door." The wind roared suddenly, lifting the petals, the cloth, even the tea itself into a whirlwind. The guests screamed, shielding their faces. The teacups shattered, the chairs toppled, and the air filled with the scent of jasmine and fear. And through the chaos, the shadow of the woman dissolved into the wind, leaving behind only silence. When the storm of petals settled, Mamie was gone. Only the pendant remained on the chair where she had been sitting. Its surface gleamed faintly in the dying light. Still warm, as if someone had just been holding it. The wind finally grew still. Only the rustle of fallen petals remained, whispering faintly across the garden floor. The guests stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the empty chair where Mamie had sat moments ago. Her teacup lay shattered at their feet, the last drop of tea slowly seeping into the tablecloth like fading ink. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine, sweet, yet mournful, as though the garden itself was holding its breath. The eldest guest, an old professor who had known Mamie since childhood, stepped forward slowly. His trembling hand reached for the pendant that gleamed softly in the dim light. He picked it up carefully, his reflection wavering on its silver surface. "It is warm," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He looked around at the others, but no one met his gaze. The garden, once filled with laughter, now seemed hollow. A place untouched by time, where something sacred had just been broken. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, and the sky turned a deep violet. A faint breeze stirred once more, carrying the scent of jasmine through the air. And for just a moment, they all heard it. A soft hum, a lullaby, drifting through the trees. "Mamie." The voice was no longer sorrowful. It was gentle, peaceful, as if someone was saying goodbye. The professor bowed his head, clutching the pendant to his chest. He turned toward the garden door, now closed as quietly as it had opened. No one had seen it move. He placed the pendant on the table beside the cold teapot. "Let it rest here," he said softly. "This house remembers her." The others nodded in silence. They left the garden one by one, their footsteps echoing faintly down the stone path. And as the last guest stepped out, a single jasmine petal drifted down onto the empty chair, resting where Mamie's hand once lay. The house grew quiet again. The night settled over it like a soft blanket. And deep within the garden, beneath the old jasmine trees, the faint shimmer of light appeared, just for an instant.